All right, we are back with another Vendetta Sports Media Daily Show. I'm Griffin Kress. Today's August 2nd, 2023. I'm Griffin Kress. Alongside me is Jack Saban. How you doing today, Jack?
I'm doing quite all right. Early morning here over in Reno, Nevada, but still looking for still looking forward to a great day.
Yeah, exactly. So it is 9:50 there where you are, 11:50 where I am, so a little time zone difference. But that being said, let's get right into it. So I know that MLB trade deadline has been kind of big, not too many like major moves, but two that kind of stick out. I'm not a big MLB guy, but Jack, I know you're kind of our lead guy here at Vendetta for the MLB stuff. So two big trades that kind of happen, and do you want to break them down for us?
Yeah. So the first big one that we saw. I mean, kind of both of the big trades and involved the Mets, and I mean, a lot of people were figuring the Mets were probably going to be some of the bigger sellers going into this deadline. They had the highest payroll going into the season, and as of now, we're fourth in the NL East at 50 and 55. Didn't look like they were going to even make a wild card spot. And so a lot of people were kind of wondering if they were going to just, try and start selling off some of these contracts or if they were just going to keep committing and double down and buy some more. And they ultimately, I think, as we all know by now, decided that they were going to be some pretty big sellers. And they started off doing that by getting rid of Max Scherzer. I can pull up his contract, but I think he's was due like 43 million or something this season. It was like a 3-year, $150 million contract. So he was set to make like 43 million or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
At age 38, it was just clear that it wasn't working out for the Mets. His ERA was about at like 4, which isn't horrible, but by Scherzer standards and for 43 million, wasn't really getting the production the Mets were wanting. In return, they got a decent prospect. It's actually Ronald Acuna Jr.'s younger brother, Luis Angel Acuna. It's kind of an interesting name, Luis Angel, but he's been tearing it up in Double A from everything I've seen. Seems to kind of have a similar play style to his younger brother. Really athletic, really fast. A lot of stolen bases. And I'm kind of hoping that he doesn't really pan out because I've dealt with enough. I've dealt with Ronald Acuna enough, and will have to for the next 10 years. So I don't really want to have to deal with another Acuna in the NL East. But yeah, I mean the Rangers, on the other hand, they're starting to take on quite the payroll. I mean they're paying a lot of guys a lot of money. They're
Mm-hmm.
already paying DeGrom a lot, who's injured. But they're kind of selling out for this year. I thought it was a pretty good trade for both sides. Mets, they're still paying a decent chunk of Scherzer's salary. I forget exactly what the number was. I think it was like around 50 million. But they, for the most part, get to kind of move off the Scherzer contract and start kind of tearing down the super expensive roster. And also in doing that, they traded Justin Verlander. Kind of once Scherzer got traded, a lot of people expected Verlander to go right after that. I know a Julian, he's a Mets guy, and he was actually saying he didn't want the Mets to trade Justin Verlander. I kind of thought that was a bit weird. I thought they should have kind of been trading him the whole time, especially once they realized they were going to be selling.
Mm-hmm.
A kind of similar thing with Scherzer. I think he was a little bit cheaper technically, but it was just kind of the same thing. He kind of wasn't playing up to his usual, Justin Verlander standards, the guy that won the Cy Young. And overall, it just kind of seemed like the Mets were sort of not kind of getting production out of some of these top end guys. They've had some injuries, and then some of these other big guys that they brought in to kind of carry the load for them, especially in the rotation, just kind of haven't really been doing that. Let's see, in this Verlander trade, the Mets received back Drew Gilbert and Ryan Clifford, two, mid-level outfield prospects. I don't know too much on them off the top of my head, but I just kind of know for this Mets team, their focus is going to be kind of shelling off some of these bigger contracts and getting prospects in return. They moved off guys like David Robertson, Mark Canha as well. And the Astros bringing back Verlander. I mean, it wasn't necessarily where I expected him to be going back. I mean, he was just on that World Series team last year
Mhm.
that beat my Phillies. So, for the Mets, it's going to be a rough rest of the season. As a Philly fan, I love seeing the Mets struggle and have to tear it down. So I'm enjoying that. But yeah, it looks like it's going to be a rough season for the Mets. The trade deadline as a whole, wasn't too bad. Can't really complain too much. Yesterday was pretty slow. Like the actual trade deadline day
Mhm.
itself was pretty slow. But yeah, the Mets were kind of the ones making most of the moves. They were kind of one of the bigger teams to focus on at the deadline and what they were going to do. And yeah, they were, going on a mass selling spree. They were clearing everything.
Yeah, it sounds like they kind of were, and the Mets especially, they're kind of second to last in the NL East right now, only in front of the Nationals who are 45 and 63. So
Yeah, they're
they're
just rebuilding.
yeah, they're rebuilding. So they're 24 and a half games behind back, but the Mets I feel like kind of went into the season with high expectations, especially with kind of Verlander and Scherzer both on the team, right?
Yep, they signed
Yep.
both. Yeah, they were both of them in the start of this year.
Mhm. Yeah, but I mean, I thought a lot of people kind of picked the Mets to be a really good team and almost win the NL East, and that kind of blew up in their face a lot. And they're 18 and a half games behind the Braves right now, who are on an incredible run right
Yeah,
now, 68 and 37, an absolute unreal kind of record right there. And it's looking like just ever since even before the trade deadline, the Mets were probably one of the most disappointing teams
yeah.
in
No, I
MLB
mean,
this
and
season, and I
that's
think it's not even close. And
yeah, like them and the Padres.
mhm,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it's like that's kind of why people were wondering what the Mets were going to do because it was just they were so far below where they wanted to be, and it's like you can't even like look at one thing I think and like pinpoint it. It's like Buck Showalter just seems inept and way out of his league at this point. They've had some injuries, but I wouldn't even say they've had enough injuries to where it should garner them playing this bad.
oh yeah,
They've just again, like I said, kind of had their some of their top end talent just kind of hasn't been performing as such, and they don't really have you know a lot of depth as a result of shelling out all this money and resources to bring in these big name guys, and they're not really performing. And it's kind of been clear to see. And an interesting point that I saw somebody make about potentially why the Mets aren't really doing so good, and I had never really thought about it, was just how old the team is and like how
mhm,
old and unathletic the team is. And they were talking about how when you look at a lot of these teams this year that have kind of been playing better than expected, like the Reds, even the Marlins, or like kind of teams like that where they're younger, they have younger guys, more guys who are more athletic, able to just do more things on the baseball field and kind
mhm,
of have prioritized depth. It's kind of like almost like a new wave of baseball, of like kind of
yeah,
focusing on
exactly,
having younger, more athletic guys, and the Mets just do not have that. I mean, they're
yeah.
old,
Even the
unathletic.
Yeah. Even the Orioles, I feel like,
Yep.
who kind of were a team that kind of jumped out of nowhere, who are leading the AL East now, like only by a game and a half. But I mean, still, they're 66 and 41. And I feel like Adley Rutschman and like I said before, I don't know too much about baseball. I know like kind of the big names behind it, but I feel like I've always remembered as the Orioles kind of have been a team that's always been at the bottom of kind of
Yeah,
the
the
totem
Orioles.
pole.
I mean, the Orioles are doing much better than expected this year.
Mhm.
Last year, they were by no means bad. I don't remember them getting into the playoffs, but I remember at one point they got like really hot last year and were kind of around that 500 record. And then this
Mhm.
year, they've kind of it's been like a whoa, the Diamondbacks were the other team that I was thinking of kind of focusing on youth. and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, the Orioles are another great example of that. They got a lot of young guys. They're an exciting team to watch. It
Hmm.
gets the fans. I mean, Cincinnati Reds fans, I'm sure, are
Exactly.
the most excited they've been to watch their team play and since Joey Votto was in his prime.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the Mets were just not fitting that bill at all.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like they've been kind of just at the top for a while, and I feel like they haven't really kind of gotten over like a championship hump and just kind of leading that expectations. And now even they're just selling at this point, and I feel like they might turn into the Orioles now. So I mean, back in like kind of the mid 2000s, and I mean another team that kind of comes to my mind is the Phillies. And I know you said you're a Phillies fan, right? And I know they were pretty bad this beginning of the season. Like they were a good amount under 500.
Yeah, we started off, it was kind of similar to last year. We started off the year, I wouldn't say like bad by any means, like we weren't horrible, but it was kind of
Hmm.
clear that we were, I think, maybe dealing with that, championship hangover, getting to the championship and the magic that was that run.
Hmm.
Things were a bit slow to start, and then it was kind of like uncanny how much it was similar to last year. We were, really bad, and then in like June and July, we get like red hot, sweep the Rays, take 2 or 3 from the Orioles,
Hmm.
and just kind of get hot in that June and July time. And yeah, I mean, yeah, it's kind of uncanny to. That's almost exactly how it went last year. Where in June and July, we kind of got hot. Seems again like we're not going to be able to catch the Braves. So this year it's just going to be a matter of getting the best wild card spot. It seems like again.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think in the MLB especially, I think you only just need a wild card spot to really kind of do something in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean the Phillies were the third wild card spot last year. We
Hmm.
were the last wild card team and made it to the World Series. I think in baseball more than any other sport. I mean, at least in, like regarding football and basketball, it's just so much more about who gets hotter. So
Yeah.
obviously that applies, to basketball and you know football as well, but in baseball especially, it's just you could be a fringe level playoff team, and then all of a sudden your lineup starts clicking, and then it's
Hmm.
like you could beat any team, and that's kind of how
Exactly.
it was for the Phillies last year in the playoffs. We just got red hot at the start of the playoffs, and couldn't lose.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of reminds me of in 2019. I think, like you said, just getting a wild card spot is just all what you really need in baseball. And I think that kind of comes to the NHL as well. And
I'm sorry if you can hear this train blaring its horn.
no, you're good. I can hear it a little bit, but it's not too bad. But that reminds me of just like the 2019 St. Louis Blues, and they were like the last team in the playoffs, and they were close to I think almost dead last in the NHL, and they just got hot and eventually got the wild card spot in the West, and they won the Stanley Cup that year, that same exact year. And I mean, they had a lot of momentum going on them, and I mean that's why sports is such a good thing. All you need is
Yep.
really just a chance, and you'll get it. But outside of the MLB, Jack, do you really have anything else on the MLB trade line, or we can move on from there?
Yeah, I think in terms of the bigger moves, that's probably good. I don't want to be here going over every single trade that was made. Obviously, it's especially in the MLB, is a lot of mid-level guys, relief pitchers and other lesser-known guys getting moved.
Hmm.
But in terms of bigger names, those were kind of, I think, the two biggest names moved at the deadline, both from the Mets.
Hmm. Yeah. Another topic that's kind of been big in I feel like the sports world is the NFL has been kind of talking about it a while, and I know they're kind of debating on whether changing the fields to actual grass, but it's the training camp injuries. And I think almost all of the NFL teams in their practice facilities have turf fields, and that's been a big topic on hand is the amount of injuries that have happened. I feel back like 2 years ago, Barkley got injured,
Yeah.
and just a lot of people went down, ACLs, ankles, just you name it. But that's also been a big topic is the injuries, and especially in training camp, like Dolphins cornerback Jalen Ramsey, Cowboys safety Donovan Wilson, Kadarius Toney, newly signed cornerback CJ Gardner Johnson from the Lions, and all those guys are getting injured. So what are your kind of initial thoughts on what can the NFL do if they can kind of prevent these injuries? Will be changing to grass fields or something else?
Yeah, I just don't know why we're not playing on grass fields yet. Like the NFL obviously has the resources and money to get grass fields everywhere. And I think it's just kind of I think we've seen enough data, and even if not data, we've just seen it firsthand enough of just all these injuries on, specifically on turf, and then, injuries resulting from going from turf to regular grass, back to turf, back to regular grass. It's e- like obviously I think grass is what should be used, but even if the NFL is going to say, okay, we're using turf, then at least have it to where all the teams are using turf. But it's even
Mhm.
more detrimental when you got some teams that are using turf, and then some teams are using grass, and then some teams, like you said, are using t- turf for their training field and then grass for an actual field. And it's clearly, like, it clearly plays a part in these injuries. Like obviously, you're playing a sport like football, you're taking that given risk of getting injured regardless. But
Mhm.
like I think at this point we've seen enough to where the NFL can be like, okay, I think it's clear that grass is probably a slightly safer option because no one likes
Mhm.
to see injuries in training camp. They're
No.
just so dumb.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And obviously, there are more kind of injuries than what I just named off.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's been a topic in the NFL a while now. And I remember the Kelsey brothers in their podcast talked about kind of the switch over and even in the Super Bowl when they played each other and kind of the turf and maybe it's like slippery or just anything like that. But players overall like grass better than turf. I know when I played football, I liked grass a lot better. It just felt like you weren't slipping as much and it just felt more natural in a sense. And obviously, right now, it's in deep consideration that you might have to switch to grass to prevent these injuries. And I don't get why the NFL doesn't really want to do it. I don't know if
It's
it's a money
cheaper
thing.
too, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it
Because
has to be cheaper.
AstroTurf is like stupid expensive.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I mean it's wasteful in a sense too. Like you have to get all kind of the rubber just in the grass or in the turf as well. And it's not really sustainable at all. And you much rather just go to grass. If the players want it, if you're gonna keep your players on the field, then the real question is why don't you do it? Because it's gonna be better for the NFL. The players want it, the fans will see their players more on the field because it'll prevent less injuries. And it just makes no sense at this point. So I think that's kind of topic the NFL really needs to consider is changing the grass fields permanently.
Yeah,
So,
but I will say, like if the NFL does like decide they do want to switch to grass fields, I think the important thing is that when I'm saying that like grass fields are better than turf fields, I'm talking about like a well maintained grass field. Like I
mhm.
know the Commanders, I don't know if they still do have the same grass field, but I know they did for a while.
Yeah.
And it was just, I mean, players will talk about it was like the worst thing to ever play on. Like I don't know
Mhm.
if you've ever seen the like picture or like the meme where it takes FedEx Field and it shows like the litany of injuries that
Yeah.
quarterbacks and like skilled players
Mhm.
all have gotten, all relating to knees and ankles and shins and just all lower body stuff. So I do think grass is the right call, but so long as that is well maintained grass.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I completely agree. I could not have said that better myself. But I think moving on from just the injury side of things, no one really likes talking about that. No one likes seeing the players get hurt. But another big topic is the NFL running back market. And I know Jonathan Taylor's kinda headlined that whole kinda idea of whether getting paid or not. I know Saquon Barkley just got paid, but
Yeah, I
at
was
his
gonna say kind of
own
started with Barkley. I feel like he
yeah.
was the initial
Yeah, he was the initial
headmaster.
guy just wanting 16 million a year, I think, something absurd for his kinda injury concern and just injury prone of just being a running back, and obviously, the whole kinda scenario is running backs are replaceable. You always can have one, but they're gonna die out quickly. Just the bruise and wear on their bodies and just being able to sustain a long career is very hard to do. And I feel like one guy that kind of outlives it all is the all-time running backs is Frank Gore. I feel like he was always one of the best one, obviously one of the best of all time, but he always kind of he played through the injuries and he was never really banged up. But I feel like now the NFL is getting, I won't say more and more physical, but it's more like enduring on the body. I feel like
Yeah, well, guys are just the average
going
guy
after each
is faster now,
other.
stronger. Yeah,
Yep.
they're getting hit harder because I mean, yeah, you mentioned Frank Gore. He's kind of one of the last. I don't even want to say like new age because I don't think you'd classify him as a new age running back. He just kind of
Mhm.
ended up retiring in the new age. But
Yeah.
like when you when you look at all these all time running backs, the Eric Dickersons, Barry Sanders, Walter Payton, it's like those guys for the most part had pretty long. Emmett Smith had long, extensive careers. Part of that I think it was just a different game back then. Injuries obviously weren't as valued or dealt with. It was just kind of like, oh, you're hurt. Well, you know, go back out and play.
Mhm.
Where it's like, now we have all this, data and science on head injuries and whatnot.
Mhm. Yeah, and even I think one thing that also gets talked about a lot is kind of the safety behind all the players and all the helmets are getting revamped. And I remember back Antonio Brown kind of wanted a different helmet, even though the NFL didn't really um, have like protection on it anymore and didn't like allow it, but more just so for the just how comfortable it was, but it wasn't really player safety. And that was kind of the NFL kind of motto in having that player safety, and even now with the quarterbacks too, protecting the quarterbacks, protecting the players. But going back again with the injuries as well, and they're not moving to grass fields. And even now, just with the running backs, they're getting injured, they're getting injury prone, and they're always just getting hurt, in fact. And that's gonna lead to the running back market crashing and just always replacing them, like with Jonathan Taylor not getting a new deal before his rookie contract ends up, and that kind of concerns just the whole running back market as a whole too.
Yeah, and I kind of understand, or I feel like I understand like both sides of it. Like I understand like running backs kind of being upset. I mean, I'd be upset too if I make it, I'm one of the best in the world, like in the world at what I do, and I'm playing at
Mhm,
the highest stage, and I'm going into it saying, okay, well, I'm going to be, the least valued player on this team outside of a kicker and a punter. It's like I'm going to be getting paid, pretty much the least amount on this team, and going into my rookie deal, I pretty much know that I have what, maybe 2, maybe 3 years if I'm
mhm.
good of being kind of the bell cow guy. So it's like I could
Yeah.
definitely understand why running backs are like, this is kind of bullshit. We're getting drafted to have 2, 3 year long careers and then become journeymen. It's like
Mhm,
unless you're one of the top 3 or 5 running backs, that's kind of the message that's being sent. So I can understand them being upset, but then I also understand why it's like that. I understand why the running back market is kind of like that. I mean, there was kind of the big trio of running backs, the Le'Veon Bell, the Ezekiel Elliott's, and the Melvin Gordon is where they all kind of held out for bigger contracts, and all those bigger contracts kind of bit their respective teams in the butt. Like, I mean, Le'Veon Bell had that whole holdout, and that just kind of derailed his career.
mhm,
The Cowboys signed Zeke to that $90 million extension, and then after they worked him into the ground, it was kind of like, okay, well now we're giving him too much money. So now it's like teams kind of are scared or hesitant to give a rookie that big contract or give a running back that big contract after his rookie deal, just because they've seen the history of just how quickly a running back's career can take a tail dive.
mhm. Yeah, no, exactly. And I feel like owners and especially GMs now are kind of being cautious, like very, very cautious in terms of wanting to give the right deal to a running back, not just how much money they want, but the right deal for that team and how long that running back is really going to last in the NFL. And I think that's their kind of standpoint of what they have to do at this point, just because the running back market is crashing so hard right now. And even Najee Harris has outspoken on Saquon Barkley and just the Giants and how he was really 30% of their offense last year. And why pay Daniel Jones, what, $40 million a year when he had a one breakout year? And if he can really sustain that, if he's going to be a running quarterback who hasn't proven himself to be a very good passing quarterback as well. So I feel like it's kind of just a conflict of just power in between the
Yeah.
running backs and the owners and the GMs, and just those kind of whose side is really that valuable in terms of just how are they going to get paid too.
Yeah, and I think the issue for the running backs is they're kind of realizing that they don't really have a whole lot of leverage or anything to stand on. I mean, you look at the two teams that were just in the Super Bowl, the Chiefs and the Eagles. You look at the Chiefs running back room, and it was Isaiah Pacheco and was it Jarek McKinnon or some,
Hmm.
yeah, and McKinnon. Pacheco was what, a sixth round pick or something like that,
Something like that. He was
and
not a
then
high round pick.
yeah, and then McKinnon's been a journeyman guy for a while. And then the Eagles had Miles Sanders, who was a 2 round pick a few like 2-3 years ago, and then Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott. Both teams were kind of doing a by committee situation, and so it's clear that if you want to be even a Super Bowl team, you
Hmm.
really don't need to be and shouldn't be spending significant money on a running back. And,
Exactly.
and yeah, I think
And
it's
I
just kind of
mean,
hurting running backs leverage a little bit.
yeah. I mean, leverage. I think leverage in the NFL and even the NBA, and I don't really think it doesn't occur too much in the MLB or the NHL as well, just the big four. But the power behind the players and the general managers, like you see in the NBA, there's every player. If they don't like their situation, if they don't like their contract, they're gonna get traded. Like if you look at KD, Kyrie, Harden, all those guys on the Nets, they immediately went out after the situation kind of blew up in their face. Now they're on different teams. Now they're wanting bigger contracts, and just kind of, in the sense, that's what the running back market's going to right now is the power dispute in it, and it just why is their value tanking so low? It's just because the owners have the power right now. They have the upper hand, and just the injuries and the long term just value, and that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna hold the running back's hand and just hold it up high. And yeah, so
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how it plays out. I mean, Saquon, I feel like kind of caved. He was all asking for, I'm worth 16 million or whatever it was, and then just kind of was immediately copped out and took that 1 year, $10 million deal. And it's like I don't, Saquon's I consider one of the best, so it's like that seems to be sort of the benchmark, at least kind of for
mhm.
now,
Yeah,
for some of the elite running backs.
yeah. I mean, I think you could look at it too with kind of the other scenarios in the NFL in terms of who else is kind of the value in terms of it's a quarterback-based league, I should really say,
Yeah.
to start off with. And Zach Martin, I know he's been offensive guard for the Cowboys. One of the best, if not the best guard in the league, is I think currently getting paid around the 11th highest
He
guard
has
in
been
the NFL.
for pretty much since he
Yeah.
got drafted back in
Mhm.
I forget
What?
exactly what year he was, 2014, 15, I was going to say something like that, maybe
Something
even
like that.
longer.
Yeah, but he's been one of the best like guards of all time.
Yeah,
Like he's going to be a Hall of Famer, no doubt in my mind.
definitely.
And it's just like he's getting paid nothing. And it's a quarterback based league. And he doesn't have really any power in this situation. He's a guard. Their market's not really high right now. And look at Jalen Hurts. He got a huge contract. Daniel Jones got a huge contract. And if you look at it like a guy like Daniel Jones, not to hate on him, he had a great year last year. But why do you want to pay that man $40 million a year? Justin Herbert deserves that. But does Daniel Jones deserve that when Saquon Barkley, who accounted for 30% of your offense last year, is getting 11? I'm not saying Saquon deserves more, but I feel like you have to spread that money around a little bit more if you really want to be successful and win. And I think that comes from just like having that type of quarterback and kind of just being smart with your money in the NFL. And I think the owners are almost being too overzealous in terms of quarterback money and need to
Yeah, they're
spread it out.
picking. It's almost like they're picking the wrong hill to die on. They're all like, "Well, we're refusing to budge and spend any real money on running backs because we don't want to, eat into our cap." Meanwhile, you're shelling out, 50 million a season for a quarterback. So it's like, I think definitely the optics of it, yeah, are definitely a bit weird. Where you're running
Mhm.
back and you're seeing all these guys getting paid. It's like they're getting rewarded and paid for being some of the best at their position. And then you're like, well, I'm one of the best at my position and I'm getting paid, squat.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a power dispute to like sum it up, and it's wrong at this point. So I wonder if like the market will ever change. Right now, I bet it will in a few years once these running backs are gone. But at this point, it's a cluster at this point, and it's just almost just wrong. So besides that, we have reached the 30-minute mark. Jack, do you have any other kind of topics you want to talk about at all, or you think we covered it all?
No, I think it's pretty good. Like I was talking about to you yesterday, we're kind of in a
The dry period.
sportageddon, as I call it, just kind
Hmm.
of Armageddon of sports. Not really a whole lot going on besides, MLB is the only sport going on right now, so kind of an unfortunate time of the year for us sports fans.
Hmm. Yeah. We're at this kind of just the standstill, as we call it. But other than that, always a good stream. Always talking to you, Jack. Today's August 2nd, 2023. I'm Griffin Kress, joined by Jack Sabin. And check out the Vendetta content as usual. We'll be having posts coming out today as usual. And thank you guys for watching.